Committee. Colleagues, it is 2 o'clock on the dot. I'm going to start. Welcome to the education meeting today. We are dealing today with the briefing by the Federation of Governing Bodies of South African Schools on the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill B2B 2022, Section 76, sent to us by the NCOP for consideration. FEDSAS is presenting to us a written submission / oral submission, essentially, and this is in line with when we asked experts and or stakeholders if they wish to do briefings to the committee on the bill and taking us, for example, clause by clause or quite technical and substantive contributions. Today, I just want to quickly explain the procedure to everyone. For those who are new to the meeting, because we're on an online system, I'm just going to ask that you please keep your mic and your video off while someone else is on the platform. Please do not feel offended if I mute you or put your video off if you are not on the platform. It simply means that you might be interrupting someone else during that time. Colleagues, I'm going to ask that you please introduce yourselves, and then just for the FEDSAS officials, Dr. Deacon himself and his team to introduce themselves, and we're going to jump straight into the presentation, followed by questions and answers. After that, I just have a letter that we received from National Treasury that I need to table afterwards in the committee, just for our consideration going forward. But with that, colleagues, my name is Deirdre Bartman, and I'm chairperson for the committee. Members?
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members and officials and delegation from FEDSAS. My name is Christopher Fry, and I'm a member of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Conrad Poole. I'm a member of this committee, and good afternoon for everybody.
Afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair. Ferlin Christian, member of this committee.
Thank you. Welcome. Ms. Hassan Musa, do you want to check if there are any apologies from other members?
Chair, we received an apology from member Sayed, and I think the new member that has been sworn in will be joining us shortly.
No problem. Thank you so much. Dr. Deacon, you can introduce yourself and your delegation and jump straight into the presentation. I'm just going to put my video off while you're on the platform.
Thank you, Chairperson and honourable members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity. Now, you'll see I'm not in my normal studio in Bloemfontein, already in Gauteng for a number of meetings, and DB and Minister's Education Legotla that will start tomorrow. So we're already in the guest house. I'm Jaco Deacon. I'm the CEO of FEDSAS, and my colleague on screen is Johanne van der Merwe, soon to be Dr. Johanne van der Merwe. She's our Deputy CEO and Head of Legal. And the reason why I emphasize the Dr. van der Merwe is her doctorate is about cooperative governance and the role of the different parties. So during our engagement, we'll touch on the aspects of cooperative governance and why those thorny issues should be a concern for the provincial government about the separation of powers. But before we get into the presentation, thank you for the opportunity. We've extended our invitation to 9 provinces, and this is actually the only province that accepted an invitation or that invited us to make this presentation, though we've been part of every single public participation session. I do believe that we'll add value and assist you in your deliberations when it comes to a mandate for your member in the NCOP. Johanne will do the presentation, the introduction, and then I'll return when we start to deal with questions and deliberations. When she's done, I'm just going to highlight, and I want to touch on that press release issued by the Minister earlier this week, which is kind of unprecedented, and making certain accusations about lies in the whole process, that we need new legislation. And that's precisely what I want to talk about when Johanne is done with the general overview, is what's already there to address the concerns of the Minister and the other politicians. But I'm going to hand over to Joanne to go through our presentation. I'm going to share the screen from my side, but Joanne will do the first part of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Jaco, and also to all of the members of the Provincial Legislature. Thank you so much from my side as well, also for this opportunity. So I'm just hanging on one moment for Jaco to just share our slides from his side. As soon as they are on screen, I'll immediately jump in with this presentation as well. There we go. I see they are on screen. Thank you very much, Jaco. So yeah, I'd like to extend our FETSAS greetings to all that's in this meeting this afternoon. I have to truly say it is an honor, and as Jaco said, the Western Cape is the only provincial legislator that responded to our request for this expert briefing. So we truly appreciate this opportunity to present our perspectives and our insights on the BALA bill. Now I'd like to firstly kick off with our first slide and just to give you a quick overview of who FETSAS is, what it is that we do. We truly consider ourselves to be a partner in education. We have been a close partner in education for many years now. Now, FETSAS is the national representative organization for school governing bodies, and we stand as a key partner in the South African education landscape. We were founded in 1993, and we have well-established structures in all 9 provinces. So we serve our schools and the education sector nationwide, also in the Western Cape. Our biggest membership footprint is then also in the Western Cape province. Now, in the alignment with the cooperative governance model as we see and as is envisaged in the Constitution, FETSAS maintains direct contact with the national and provincial education departments. We actively participate in the different consultative forums, especially in the Western Cape as well. Myself, I was privileged enough to attend the last consultative forum meeting in the Western Cape, but we also serve on the National Consultative Forum that was established in 1999, and that directly followed engagements between FETSAS and the then Minister of Education. So we are closely, and we do closely believe and truly believe in that cooperative governance model that is envisaged in the Constitution. We have over 2,000 members in South Africa and across this the country. We serve members of diverse languages and coming from different cultural communities, from the deep rural areas in South Africa to our cities. We, as FETSAS, also participated in all 27 of the public hearings that was held by the Education Portfolio Committee. Up until now, we also participated in 36 of the additional public hearings that was conducted by the provincial legislators in all 9 provinces. We know that the public hearings in the Western Cape is still ongoing, and we will surely be present at those hearings as well. Now, at FETSAS, we believe, and that is also our vision, to preserve and promote quality education for every child throughout South Africa. We also believe that schools are more than just places of learning. They truly are the beating hearts of our communities, and they shape the future of our children. So at the core of every successful school is truly its school governing body. And we know a good functioning school governing body comprises of dedicated individuals that steers the direction and the policy in that specific school. Now, when we look at the second important point that I would like to make today is just to give you a quick overview of the most important and the underlying principles, because there needs to be a proper understanding of these principles to understand the context within which we also give our comments to you this afternoon. So These principles are important because they also lay the foundation of exactly how our education system works. Now, when we look at the historical context of our education environment, we know that until the 1990s, schools in South Africa were characterized by a hierarchical authoritarian structure and culture in South Africa. Now, then recognizing the need for change, the newly established Department of Education aimed to shift decision-making responsibility in schools from bureaucrats to a more decentralized and collaborative structure. FETSAS were also part of that process, and we supported and still today support the move away from a state schooling system to a public schooling system. That then also led in 1997 to the enactment of the South African Schools Act, which sought to uphold the rights of learners and parents, educators, and truly their involvement in the governance of our South African schools. Then when we look at the role that parents play, and this is also one thing that we need to strongly emphasize, is that the South African Constitution recognizes parents as having the primary responsibility for the education of their children. Parents have the right to choose the form of education that is best for their children. And that right also includes the right to decide on language, culture, the religious foundation of their education. And that right is also very clearly enshrined in White Paper 1. That is the document that preceded the drafting of the South African Schools Act. Now, when we look at the Schools Act, it also emphasizes the importance of parental involvement in the education and also in the establishment of school governing bodies as a means to facilitate the involvement of parents in the governance and the education of their children. So parents are represented in the school governing body, and they are typically the majority component to ensure that they have a significant influence on the policies and the practices that takes place in our schools. Parents also play a central role in the governance of schools in South Africa, ensuring that their voices are heard and that they also have a voice in the say on how their schools are run. So this reflects the broader commitment to our democratic principles and also the recognition as parents as the key stakeholder in our South African education system. Now, very importantly, when we look at a differentiated society versus a totalitarian state, it is important to emphasize that in a differentiated society like South Africa very clearly, and I have to emphasize this, being a differentiated society, if one were to limit parents' rights in education, that would have significant implications for our society as a differentiated society. It would very clearly undermine the principles of the democracy and participatory governance that have been central to our post-apartheid education reforms. By limiting parents' ability to participate in school governance, the government would be reducing diversity of voices and perspectives that contribute to decision-making, which might then also lead to decisions that do not reflect the needs and the preferences of the communities which they serve. That will also take us back to a totalitarian state where the government seeks to take control and to exert control over all aspects of society, centralizing power and control. And this is where my true passion then lies, is our cooperative governance model that we have in our education system in South Africa. I spent 4 years of my life truly researching this specific topic, so I'd like to touch on this as well. In South Africa, we know our education system is governed through a cooperative model that is envisioned a partnership between the national, provincial government and also our school governing bodies. Now, our constitution has affirmed that the cooperative governance model in education in South Africa is a cornerstone of our democracy. It emphasizes the importance of collaboration and partnership between the different levels of government and school governing bodies. So if we were to limit the powers of the governing bodies and to centralize the power in government, we would completely and utterly contradict this cooperative governance model as is installed and envisioned in our constitution. There is a couple of cases. I'm not going to go into the detail of those cases this afternoon. I would, however, just like to refer you to the matters of Ermelo and Welkom. Those are the two court cases that emphasize the importance of protecting and giving effect to the Bill of Rights, and that would include the right of parents in the governance of our school, and that also emphasize the importance of that cooperative governance model that we have and the protection of that in our South African education system. Now, when we look at the proposed amendments, I'd like to highlight that it is against this backdrop of preserving our current democracy and our participatory governance structures in our South African schools that we must analyze the potential impacts of the proposed amendments. It is our view and it is our submission that there are several proposed amendments that pose a threat to the progress of our education system reform. Those, and I will highlight them to you as well, those specific clauses that suggest that there's more of an attitude that the state holds the ultimate authority over certain powers. Now, these changes, proposed changes that we see in the Bill would centralize power in the hands of the state, and it would diminish parents and parental rights and diminish the rights of parents as significant stakeholders in our education system. It risks the reinstatement of an authoritarian structures and systems that we have seen in the past, and it would also undermine the strides that we have made towards our democratic governance. Now, in simple and practical terms, it will take us back to a state school system. And that was the system that we have deliberately abandoned 30 years ago. But I will elaborate a bit further on this in the coming slides. Very importantly, and I would also want to highlight this and bring this to the attention of the Western Cape legislator, is that several submissions was made to the Portfolio Committee by Mr. James Ndlebe. He is the Director for Education Management and Governance Development at the Department of Basic Education. He proposed that the sections in the South African Schools Act specifically concerning admissions and language policies of public schools remain unchanged. Unfortunately, and I have to say regrettably, these recommendations that was made by the Department of Basic Education were not taken into consideration by the Portfolio Committee and are also not reflected in the committee's report. So it is very concerning that the Department of Education's own suggestions to maintain the current position as set out in the South African Schools Act regarding language and admissions were wholly ignored. It also appears that this oversight was not noted or acknowledged by the Portfolio Committee. So we would like to urge this legislator to also investigate this omission that was made by the Portfolio Committee. And we also encourage you to not make the same mistakes as was made by the Portfolio Committee, and to also heed the department's recommendations regarding this and these specific provisions. Now, when we prepared our FETSAS comments, we took a specific stance and a specific point of view, and I trust that this legislator will also concur with the specific view that the primary and the ultimate goal of the Bala Bill should be to improve quality of education for every child in South Africa. And in our assessment of the Bala Bill and its clauses, we use the specific criteria to judge whether it would improve the quality of education for every child in South Africa. So we basically asked 3 questions. We considered the proposed amendments that will improve education in South Africa. We also highlighted and emphasized and put forward the specific clauses that we believe would not contribute to the spirit and the objectives of the South African Schools Act and the Constitution. And we also highlighted some shortcomings that we felt needed to be addressed in the Bala Bill. So I will now delve into each of these criteria. And I would like to first start with the proposed amendments that we support that will improve education in South Africa. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of each of them. We will gladly provide you also with our written comments as was made to the NCOP, the National Council of Provinces. But in essence, I would like to highlight that we endorse those sections that enhance education and consequently the management of education in our South African education system. But I'm not going to go into the details of those proposed amendments. What we would do like to spend some time on is the proposed amendments that do not contribute and that is not within line of the spirit of our Constitution and the spirit of the South African Schools Act. So the first amendment or proposed amendment I would like to discuss is that of clause 4 in the Bala Bill that relates to the admissions policy of schools. Now, as FETSAS, we strongly oppose clause 4. That's the proposed amendments to section 5. We are convinced that these amendments do not only restrict the school governing body's authority over a school's admissions policy, but it also infringes upon parents' rights. The proposed provision grants the provincial HOD the final authority to admit learners, and that undermines the collaborative framework of the Act and also limiting parents' involvement in decision-making regarding their children's education. We also argue that the governing body, who is intimately involved in the school's operations, is best suited to determine the school's admissions policy, and that would also include considering factors related to planning and governance. We are also concerned about the practicality of the proposed improvement or approval process, which requires the HOD to approve every school's admissions policy and any amendments made thereto. Given the logistical challenges faced by provinces in handling day-to-day submissions and correspondence, this process seems completely impractical, especially when we look at the large number of public schools in South Africa. So we believe that this proposed amendment would hinder the effective governance and decision-making at school level. Consequently, we therefore move and propose the complete removal of that specific clause and section. The current section of this Act is sufficient to give effect to the constitutional right to education, and the HOD and MEC already have the powers to deal with any abuse in this specific regard. So we would like to submit that the only additions that should be a provision for the making of national regulations on the determination of capacity in schools, but I will deal with that and give you some detail on that in a moment. Then the second clause that is worrisome is that of clause 5, language policies of public schools. Now, the proposed amendments in clause 5 of The bill grants the HOD the power to direct the school governing body concerning language policies, and that raises concerns similar to those regarding the HOD having the final authority to approve a school's admissions policies. This indicates once again a shift towards an authoritarian system and also a reluctance to uphold the values and the provisions of the Constitution. We therefore also reject this specific clause, and we advocate for its complete removal. Now, with the extensive power to add additional languages, schools will then eventually all become parallel medium schools, and our current post-provisioning and funding model does not adequately address the challenges of multilingual education in South Africa. We have also not seen any costing in this regard, and submit also that this information should be made available before any information or any decisions has been made in this specific regard. We know that the reality is that ultimately our provinces will have to foot the bill of all of these effects that we will see in our South African schools and provinces. Now, when we look at additional issues and opportunities specifically relating to admissions in our schools, we have seen that most of the disputes, and this has truly been my experience at my time at FETSAS, is that the most disputes between governing bodies and provincial education departments do not involve schools' language and admissions policies. These conflicts often arise when schools are asked to admit more students than it can accommodate, and that's usually the refusal is usually due to financial, administrative or physical space limitations that schools have. So the key issue is actually determining whether a school has the capacity to accept additional learners. Now, to address these challenges, we rather need to see clear guidelines which is aligned with the national minimum uniform norms and standards for public schools to clearly determine the capacity or to prescribe a formula to determine capacity in schools. So we therefore propose establishing objective criteria through national regulations to guide school governing bodies and education departments in this specific regard. Then when we look at clause 14, clause 14 relates to the proposals regarding central procurement. This also raises concerns as it actually bypasses the allocation of the function to governing bodies under the Schools Act, which then potentially allows the HOD to revoke this function from school governing bodies without due process being followed. We also have concerns about the department's capacity to effectively procure quality materials. And given past challenges, we've seen that a lot of departments is not able to deliver LTSM in a timely manner. So until we as a country have adequately also dealt with the issues regarding corruption, we foresee that central procurement will rather result in losses for the education sector and will definitely not be in the best interest of our children. So we also move that this proposed amendment should be removed unless it allows schools to voluntarily opt into the procurement method. If that provision can be made, then we can discuss supporting the specific provision regarding central procurement. Then, when we look at the proposal to requiring of schools to submit quarterly reports on income and expenditure, we would like to point out that this requirement is now proposed in addition to schools who already submits annual audited financial statements. And we do believe, and we have seen the great administrative burden under which our schools and school principals are currently functioning. We do foresee that this proposed amendment would also impose further significant financial and administrative burdens on our governing bodies and on the schools' resources. We therefore propose that This proposed clause do not come with extra funding. Oh, sorry, I would like to highlight that this does not come with extra funding or staffing for schools. If we were to retain this provision, it must also be tailored to a situation where compelling reasons exist for the submission of such reports. It is once again, I want to highlight that schools already submit on a yearly basis audited financial statements to the education departments. So if this specific clause were to apply exclusively to schools that did not submit their audited financial statements the previous year, or if schools perhaps received a qualified audit, then the acceptance of this clause would be warranted. So we propose that the regulations, that there should also be regulations that should be developed to deal with those schools and the proposal and the process that must be followed to correct the position and status of that specific school. And then finally, when we look at provincial capacity, and this is also one of the big red flags, is that we have from FETSA's side requested a comprehensive costing analysis from the select committee, and we've also written to all of the provincial legislators regarding the specific affordability and viability of implementing the BALAP changes within their specific provinces. Unfortunately, we have not received a reply or an analysis in this regard, but we want to emphasize that this analysis must be conducted before a proper decision can be made and is made on the feasibility of approving the proposed amendments. The analysis that we propose should also cover the funding for making grade R compulsory, auditing the available spaces and infrastructure for grade R, looking at the availability of qualified educators for grade R, and also for double and parallel medium schools in South Africa. And then also finally, we need to see what the implications would be for the funding to introduce more parallel or double medium schools in the respective provinces. So we want to highlight that our current funding model and our post-provisioning model do not account for these aspects, and in implementing them would be definitely more expensive than single medium school model that we currently have, and this will also impact on the different provinces' budgets. So we want to highlight that as well. And yeah, if we go to the next slide, when we look at the shortcomings and our proposals, I would just quickly like to highlight those to you as well. We feel that it is necessary to also include a definition of a meeting in the Schools Act in response to the challenges that we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic. A clear definition of meetings is suggested to address any uncertainty surrounding the online gatherings that schools are having. Let's rather use this as an opportunity to apply the lessons that we learned from COVID and to take the step to bring schools into the pace with the rest of the world. I'm not going to deal with the admissions. I've actually already discussed that in detail, specifically referring to blended learning model and regulations on the determination of schools' capacities. Also, when we look at national and provincial consultative forums for school governing bodies, we know that that is a space for meaningful dialogue. So the establishment of a formal statutory structure for national and provincial governing body organizations is also recommended by us. The minister, we suggest, would be responsible for issuing regulations governing the operations of these forums. And we also would like to highlight that unions have the ELRC, but school governing bodies must rely on agreements that was concluded between the departments and our associations. So we strongly feel that that is not the message that we should be sending out to our different partners in education. Then when we look at the determination of financial directions, the proposal that we would like to table is that Section 31 must be amended to empower the minister rather than the HOD to determine the directions under which the school governing body must establish and administer their school funds. We have a uniform system and standards in South Africa when it specifically comes to financial management, and therefore we do believe and feel that it warrants national regulations. When we look at the final recommendations from our side, we feel that it is also important to include in the South African Schools Act that national regulations prevails over any provincial laws to specifically avoid conflicts between national and provincial legislation. We make this specific proposal. We have ample examples of this type of prescripts, specifically when you look at our Labour Relations Acts as well. So just to conclude, before we go over to answering some of your questions that you might have, I would like to emphasize that as FETSAS, we remain dedicated to advancing quality education and our democratic governance in our South African schools. We know while the bill do have some positive aspects, they are quite overshadowed by those 4 points that I have highlighted in this presentation, and we do feel that they would hinder rather than enhance the quality of education in South Africa. Now, as a key education partner from FETSAS' side, we advocate for maintaining school governing body autonomy and for promoting cooperative governance involving all stakeholders, specifically our parents. We oppose the ballable amendments that centralize power, reduce parental involvement, and undermine the progress that we have made in the governance in the education over the last couple of years. So I thank you so much for your attention and for your consideration in this regard.
Thank you, Yona. Thank you, Yona. Members, I would like to touch on the main concerns by the Minister in the latest press release. And based on what we've experienced in our presentation before the Portfolio Committee, as well as the remarks that we've seen, specifically accusations towards Afrikaans schools as if they use language to exclude learners from attending school. I think there's a few important things to remember. Our legislation is not against discrimination. Our legislation is against unfair discrimination. Unfortunately, the reality is that close to 80% of our public schools are dysfunctional, and 20% of our schools cannot make provision and cannot take responsibility for 100% of our learners. So in a typical FETSAS school, some of our members will have 150 places in a grade 8 group for the next year, and they'll get 2,000 applications. Now, obviously, they need criteria that will discriminate against learners to pick the 150 learners. So as long as they can justify the criteria they use, that would be considered as fair discrimination. The other reality that we see is if we look at the Afrikaans-speaking population, they're at just about 10% if we look at the latest statistics from the general survey, that more or less 10% of our schools would offer tuition in Afrikaans. So I don't think Afrikaans is necessarily the culprit in the system. The argument we get from the officials and the politicians in that portfolio committee is that how can government allow that learners struggle to get access to schools? And then they start to accuse schools without naming a school or a specific province or a specific incident that discriminate against learners. The current legislation makes provision where the HOD and the MEC can act immediately when they know there's unfair discrimination. In the admissions process, the learner and his or her parent can immediately appeal to the MEC, in your instance, the Minister of Education, and during that appeal process, the Minister of Education in your province should get access to the criteria. The SGBs should put their case forward, and based on the evidence in front of the Provincial Minister for Education or MEC in other provinces, he or she can make a determination. If they felt that there's blatant discrimination, then it can be overturned. The Minister of Education can go further and instruct the HOD to use his or her powers in terms of Section 22 and or Section 25 of the Schools Act to remove certain functions of the SGB, or even to remove members of the SGB if they blatantly blatantly disregard the laws of our country and discriminate against learners. So what is mooted to be a solution for discrimination is actually already in the Schools Act. We haven't seen provinces and HODs utilize those clauses in all those perceived cases of unfair discrimination all over the country. In fact, if you really consider those, it is actually an accusation against the HODs and MECs if they claim there's unfair discrimination, and they haven't acted in terms of the laws that's already there to deal with. There's a counter proposal on central procurement. If the state can really provide a better price than what schools can get elsewhere, obviously a good governing body would purchase from the state. And you will now refer to an opt-in system, that if that's the better price, let schools then decide to opt in. The two provinces where we have members in Limpopo and Northwest, where they do have central procurement, our members in high schools would get crayons and clay, and our members in the primary schools would get calculators and scissors that's not applicable and not useful in the school. So we have first-hand experience of the disasters of central procurement on the quality of the products, the delivery of the products, and the specific needs where there's a total disconnect. Members, you have the opportunity to really scrutinize these clauses, and we're not going to do a clause-by-clause discussion. You're going to have it, and you'll have access to our documents. I would rather request that we deal with questions from your side, because you had an opportunity to listen to the concerns coming from members of the public so far, and based on what we've presented to you today. And we would gladly engage with you on that. What we're not going to address is the concerns from the parents, from the homeschooling community. We represent schools, public and independent schools, and we don't have members in the homeschooling sector, but I know they've got serious reservations and serious concerns. And the last remark from my side, before I'd really like to invite you to ask questions, is we're not on the bandwagon of abortions and sexual abuse, and the Act is actually there to protect sexual predators in the system. We don't read the Act in that specific way, and we've been very outspoken against false information being spread, unfortunately, on Christian networks about the Bella Bill. So the four main concerns raised by you and I, and if we can address those effectively, and add the other stuff that we think is important while we go through this exercise, let's improve, let's enhance the quality of education, then we can support. So, Chair, with that, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for giving us sufficient time to put arguments forward. We would gladly take questions from members of the committee.
Thank you so much. Committee members, there you have it. I'm just going to quickly check, Dr. Deacon, the references that yourself and Ms. van der Merwe, or incoming Dr. van der Merwe, were making. Those are based on the page numbers on your written submission.
That's correct, Chairperson. Okay. We'll just make sure that you have that document in front of you as well. That's the one that we've submitted to NCOP as well. So just to assist you with the clause, the page number, and then the specific section in SASO. So hopefully that will help you.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, before I take hands, I just want to give you guys some feedback on the written submissions we've received so far. And we also thank FEDSAS for asking us to make this particular submission. As at yesterday, we have received as a provincial parliament 3,156 submissions, 1,519 online submissions, and 397 WhatsApp submissions. The WhatsApp submissions were even so much that WhatsApp even sent our procedural message to say, we don't know what is going on here on the cell phone number. Please, can you use another cell phone number, which is why we also put out a media statement. But with that, colleagues, I'm taking hands on the presentation now. If there are no hands, I have a question. Quickly check if I'm not missing a hand. Miss van der Merwe, I just want to check in terms of the provincial capacity principle argument that you made. One of that has been floating around that we found out via National Treasury / DBE in the different committees has been that AR is going to cost approximately 12 billion rand to implement across the various provinces. Now, I don't know where South Africa is going to find 12 billion rand, but in terms of provincial capacity, the provinces have been quite stretched in a very strict fiscal environment. We also see there's the bill with the long gold name, where we need to actually start considering how we need to ensure that our debt as a country even is paid so that we don't need to, as I would metaphorically call it, sell the house. And I just want to find out what FEDSAS's view was on that, because I'm not sure if you have sections or proposals in your submission regarding the costing of the bill. That is something that I'm quite concerned about. I'm not sure about other members, but I'm not sure if FEDSAS has a view on that. Thank you.
Chair, I will take that question as I took the responsibility to raise the matter with the Minister and with DG. And the answer is, and obviously we've got a very same concern that you've raised is our concern. And we asked the question, is the money available? Can we implement next year? And then all the officials start to look to the left and the right and to one another. And then DG said, the moment that it is approved, Treasury promised to find the money. That's not sufficient. We cannot adopt things and we know the money is not there. And our biggest concern is that the education will not get a bigger slice of the budget. In fact, if you look at the past few years, education had a huge slice. And for the next few years, there's actually lesser money flowing to education. So there's definitely not a plan to bring in new money. So what's the alternative? We need to reallocate money within the system. Now, we cannot take money away from the educators because we have a formula of 1 to 35 or 1 to 40. So you've got a constitutional right, so we're bound by that. So I fear that the place they're going to cut cost and take shortcuts is to take electives away from our high school learners, and that the high schools would actually and finally pay the price for the introduction of grade R. In fact, I think the 12 billion is very conservative. I think it will be much more because that is based on educators, on classrooms, but the material, the education toys and the facilities and the outdoor play areas, that's very costly. And that's a massive investment you need to make before you can do that. And then obviously it's clear, and I had a meeting this morning in the SA Council for Educators, I'm a council member, that we don't have sufficiently trained grade R educators. So I don't think the 12 billion is a real figure. I think it will be closer to 18. And I know for a fact that we don't have the money in the country and additional money won't flow to education. So we didn't get a good answer from the DG, and we didn't get a good answer from the minister. And I think that's a very valid question. At the end of the day, and it happened to the Western Cape last year, you experienced it firsthand where there's a budget cut, they'll simply tell the provinces you need to manage. And I've got a gut feeling that this will be one of those items where they'll tell the provinces, manage. Now, at least, Chairperson, they've made at least an estimate what grade R will cost. They're silent on what the additional languages will cost. If you give a power to the HOD to introduce a new language in that school and make a single medium school either dual medium or parallel medium, we haven't seen any costing on language. And I think it's important for the province to take note of that because, again, you'll have to foot that bill.
Thank you so much. I just want to check again if there are any other members with questions before I move on. If none, then I just want to say thank you to the FEDSAS team for doing a briefing with us today on your particular submission. We really appreciate it, and we really appreciate it when stakeholders come and they say, actually, we want to participate on legislation, we want to participate on public participation. I sometimes tell the committee members with my budget hat on that I'm very jealous, actually, of the level of public participation in other committees, such as education, that I see, and that we don't always see it across legislation and across committees. So we appreciate it, and we will incorporate your comments and your contributions and your submission. I'm not sure. I know Ms. van der Merwe asked us a question regarding whether we can request investigation regarding what Mr. Ndlebe said in another committee. I'm not sure whether that is legally possible, given that we're a different sphere of parliament. But what I will do is, if you can forward us the information, I will ask our legal team from WCPP and the Speaker's office if we're allowed to raise it, and if so, in which platform and in which manner. But I'm honestly, I don't have an answer for you in this regard. Dr. Deacon?
Chair, I do have an answer for you. It's possible for this committee to call Mr. Ndlebe back as he did the expert briefing or the briefing on the bill. And just explain what happened regarding their proposals. We had a very long discussion about language and admission and the policies. And he agreed to say there's no need for government to police 23,000 schools if 200 schools are actually busy with misdemeaning and with discrimination. Deal with those schools, and those mechanisms are already there. And I'm sure that you can invite him back and he can share that with this committee. Then you don't have to rely on another one. And I know he presented twice in front of your committee. So I don't think there's anything that prohibits you, based on the information that you received, to ask him to clarify that position. So then you don't have that legal dilemma.
Thank you so much. I think that is a great suggestion, actually. But with that, you're welcome to stay on the meeting should you wish. I just have some short feedback relating to Bella, actually, that I'll be giving to the members and the committee business. But if not, you're also welcome to go about your day-to-day business.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this opportunity, and all the best. To work through 3,100 contributions will take some time. And to do justice to public participation. So we're going to have a school holiday, but it seems as if you're not going to have a break. So all the best. And again, thank you. I would gladly listen to what you're going to say about Bella, and then maybe we'll slip out. So from our side, thank you so much. And also to the other members. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So members, please do remain online. I just have some feedback for you, and then just some administrative decisions that we need to make in this regard. So I'll just repeat quickly. As of yesterday, we have received 3,156 submissions, 1,519 online submissions, and 397 WhatsApp submissions. This means that as of yesterday, our committee officially have exceeded the 5,000 target. in terms of submissions. So when I say target, I actually just mean that we've gone over 5,000. We have also requested the NCOP to extend the negotiating mandate. I've written to them to say we have received so many submissions. We also have been at 4 public hearings so far. We have another 3 coming up. At the Beaufort West public hearing, there was 138 persons. At Plettenberg Bay, there was 336 persons present. At George, there was 1,130 people present. And at Moss Bay public hearing, there was 514 people present. So as you can see, the bill has received quite a bit of attention in the province. Our next public hearing will be on Friday in Paarl. The next one will be on the 22nd in Saldanha. And then on the 4th, we will have a double session in the city of Cape Town in the chamber, 3 o'clock until 5 o'clock, as well as 6 o'clock until 8 o'clock, in order to, the earlier sessions in order to accommodate those who are observing Ramadan, who need to break their fast at a later stage. But given the current interest in the bill, as constituency heads, also members, I would like to ask you if people could attend the Cape Town one a little bit earlier, then we could have more of a 50-50 split between the 2 sessions in order to allow as many persons as possible to make submissions. I would hate for the committee to have to end our meeting without people receiving an opportunity to make their respective submissions. Just another reminder that the written and online and WhatsApp submission deadline closes on the 4th of April. So if anyone still wants to make those respective submissions, they may do so. Okay. Then, sorry, it's a lot of feedback actually that I need to give you all. Then Ms. Hassan Musa, if you can just put up the letter that we forwarded to the members today that we received from National Treasury. I'm just giving it a second or so just to appear. I just see a gray screen for now. Okay, Ms. Hassan Musa just messaged to say that she thinks she just got kicked out, so I'll just give it a minute or so for her to return online. Perfect. Thank you. Just make it a little bit bigger for me, please. Thank you so much. Okay, colleagues, you were forwarded this letter and I'm hereby tabling it in the committee now today. Just to give you some feedback, on the 2nd of February during our briefing to the committee by the DBE official, Mr. Ndlebe, indicated that Treasury has confirmed that they will be funding the bill once passed. Okay, not going to go through the whole thesis of it, but that's essentially what occurred. The DBE official, Mr. Ndlebe, then suggested that we call National Treasury to say, okay, how is the bill going to be funded, the costing, and we had lots of other questions on grade R and subsidies and lots of other things. Okay. We then resolved and we wrote to National Treasury in accordance to our respective resolution that we made. And National Treasury, we asked essentially in our resolution that National Treasury must come brief us on the costing. We want to know where the money is going to come from. So National Treasury has come back and I'll read the letter. The letter says, the National Treasury received the invitation to address the committee on this matter. Section 35 of the Public Finance Management Act on unfunded mandates provides that the department which submits the draft legislation should provide the financial implications. It reads as follows, and then it quotes the Section 35 unfunded mandates draft national legislation that assigns an additional function or power to or imposes any other obligation on a provincial government must, in a memorandum that must be introduced in Parliament with that legislation, give a projection of the financial implications of that function, power or obligation to the province. Given the Department of Basic Education is the department that introduced the legislation, they need to provide the financial implications thereof, not the National Treasury. The Department of Basic Education should thus be invited to brief the committee on the comprehensive budget that will be needed for this bill. So as you can see, members, we have a bit of a chicken and egg situation where DBE has referred us to National Treasury and National Treasury has now referred us back to BBE. So my suggestion, members, and I would like to hear your input on this, my suggestion would be that we call DBE. We already have a slot assigned where we're going to have National Treasury brief us on the costing. But someone needs to tell us how much this bill is going to cost, where the money is going to come from, where the funding is going to come from, and how it's going to be implemented in a financial manner. And that is what we asked. So my suggestion is that we call DBE in the slot that we were going to have for National Treasury, and we still ask National Treasury to also be present, because I would hate for us to end up also at that next meeting just for us to end up again in a not my monkey, not my circus situation. But yes, colleagues, please, I need your assistance and guidance in this regard as to our next step. Member Fry?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe that we should call the DBE to explain to us how they're going to fund this, the billable, and we can use the slot that we were going to give to National Treasury to do for them to come to make the presentation on an urgent basis, because time is not on our side. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Member Christians?
Yes, Chair, I want to agree. I think it's going to assist us greatly if we are both there at the same time and then just, discuss it. That they cannot pass the buck if both is there. They'll have to give us an answer. But maybe, Chair, what I just want to say is that we also get, a presentation before the time so that we can just look at it. So I don't know how we can do it if both, but we can work it out who must give us a presentation so that we at least have something in black and white. Thank you, Chair.
I think what might be prudent is let us follow the recommendation by National Treasury that DBE does a presentation for us, the briefing for us, but that we ask National Treasury to be present so that if we have any questions that need to be directed to National Treasury, that we don't end up in a situation where we have to go back and forth between departments and different officials. Members, is that in order for resolution? And we will then host it in the session where we're going to host the National Treasury one in the first place.
That's in order with me, Chair.
Perfect. Colleagues, I think that is all the feedback I was supposed to give. Ms. Hassan Musa, if you can just make sure that I haven't missed anything.
No, Chair, you've covered everything. Just need to remind members about Friday's public hearing, and that's about it.
Yes, members, if you are traveling on your own or traveling with WCVP, please, Ms. Hassan Musa does need to know that particular information. If you have constituents that require assistance with transport, please do let Ms. Hassan Musa know in advance so that she can assist with the organization thereof. And I just want to check, we don't have any minutes for adoption or any of that regard. Ms. Hassan Musa?
No, Chair, there's no minutes at this stage. I would just kindly request members to send through those transport requests well in advance. It's difficult to get quotations on the day of the public hearing.
No problem. And we also did send out a updated media statement just to let members of the public know that there will be an earlier session as well in Cape Town on the 4th, should they wish to attend the earlier session. But with that, members, any other resolutions before I conclude?